call Stuart Nash.
Mr Speaker, I must admit, the first sentence that the Minister made in the Taxation, Residential Land Withholding Tax, GST online services and Students' Loan Bill was wrong, and it's a real shame. The Minister said this was a wide-ranging bill. Unfortunately, it's not. It should be, it could be, it actually needs to be, but it's not. Mr Speaker, this is a bill that attempts to address three really important issues. However, it just doesn't do particularly well in a way that addresses the real issues or provides solutions to identified problems. And it could have. It just shows the government sort of lost its track when it comes to tax. Mr Speaker, let's start at the beginning. There are three issues this bill attempts to address, as is pretty evident in the title, and the first one is resident withholding tax. Mr Speaker, this is the third bill in a series of three bills which attempts to capture or bring property speculators into the tax net. The problem with the bill, Mr Speaker, as the IRD itself has outlined, is the cost of implementing the system is $5 million, and the amount of revenue that the IRD forecast they'll get out of this is $5 million. It doesn't even come close to addressing the situation. Mr Speaker, let me give you just a very small example of the scale of the problem we're dealing with. Last year alone, the IRD captured about $65 million from taxpayers it believed were rorting the system through property speculation. That's just the IRD going after people when there isn't even a bright line test in. The IRD know, we know, the government knows there is a real problem with property speculators not paying their fair share. And the three bills that have come before the House, this is the last of the third bill, really just does not address the issue at all. And it is a real shame, because there was an opportunity, there was an opportunity, it's gone now, for the government to really grab the bull by the horns in this sphere and show some real leadership in a way that I think the country is after. Certainly those in Auckland know the scale of the problem, but there has been a complete lack of leadership, which is a real shame. In fact, I sort of wonder, when Michael Woodhouse was told that he was going to be Revenue Minister, he was given a bit of a hospital pass actually, because there's been a lazy minister who's done very little in this space, and I suspect Michael will be a little bit better, but I'm certainly not holding my breath. But what Michael does have to contend with is an IRD system that's worth about $1.2 billion. Don't worry about the $10 billion in the policing system. Yeah, absolutely, mate. And have a number of worm farms there, Dr. Clark. The second issue, Mr. Speaker, is GST on online services. And let me give you a quote from the Minister himself, the Minister for the next 5 days himself. He says, and I quote, "GST should apply to all consumption that occurs in New Zealand. This is what makes our GST system fair, efficient and simple," says Mr McLean. End quote. You know what, Mr Speaker? He's dead right. It should apply to everything. But this does not address the problem. The problem we've got at the moment, Mr Speaker, is if anyone buys something from bricks and mortar, you walk into a shop, you buy a pair of jeans, a record, a CD, not a record, but a CD or anything like that, then there's a 15% GST on that. That's fair. If you buy one of these items offshore, Mr Speaker, there is no GST. It's our belief that what the government at least should be trying to do is just level that playing field, not give any sort of competitive advantage to those based offshore, just level the playing field. We're not saying that New Zealanders shouldn't buy stuff online. It's their absolute right to. In fact, it's what 21st century shopping is becoming more and more about. But what we shouldn't have in this country, Mr Speaker, is a system that actually penalises people who are setting up shops, who are employing people, who are paying rates and paying their taxes. But all this does, Mr Speaker, is targets offshore suppliers of things like music, e-books, etc. So we're talking about companies like Apple, Netflix, Microsoft, but this is not where the real issue is. We're supporting this bill, and we do think that if you are buying e-books and music and software online, that a consumer should be paying GST. But the real issue, Mr Speaker, is to do with buying things like you get in the retail sector, because at the moment an offshore supplier has a 15% advantage from the get-go. So this only applies to companies that have a $60,000 per annum sales to New Zealand customers. That equates to around about $7,800 in GST. It will bring in money. There is no doubt about that, but we think it should go a lot further. And Mr. Speaker, this has been an issue that has been on the table for a long time. We're still waiting for another discussion document, but it's been 7 long years, and the retail sector have signalled this to the government and the minister for a long time. Mr. Speaker, the third issue is the student loans one. Now, I think everyone would agree that if a student borrows money at interest-free, then they have entered into a form of social contract with the government and they should pay that money back. We have no problem with that. But, Mr. Speaker, this is not just about doing an agreement with Australia, which is what this bill ratifies, a double agreement between Australia and New Zealand, where New Zealanders who had taken out student loans and who are now living in Australia but aren't paying back their student loans in any way, shape or form will be brought into the net, and it's vice versa as well. So when there are Australian students who've taken out student loans and they have a similar system to ours, if they're living in New Zealand and they're not paying back their student loan, then they'll be forced to as well. But Mr. Speaker, the problem is actually worldwide. We should be doing these sorts of agreements with the British Isles, for example, or the United States, for example. So what we actually do is capture students who have taken advantage of the opportunities that we have provided them through education, with the interest-free student loans, and bringing them all back into the net. But as it stands, Mr. Speaker, we're just going after those in Australia. Now, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this is a bill that could have been bold. It is a bill that addresses 3 issues that are widely known within this Parliament and certainly within society. Mr. Speaker, that is bringing speculators into the tax net. We think it could have gone a lot further, and it hasn't. The second issue is GST on online goods and services. We believe this should have captured the retail sector. It could have brought in a lot more and it could have levelled the playing field, but it hasn't. And student loans. Mr. Speaker, it goes part of the way, but it doesn't address the real issue. There are 3 issues here the government could have gone hard on, could have shown real leadership on, and you know what, Mr. Speaker, we would have supported them on those. We would have supported them. We are supporting this bill. We look forward to it going to select committee and having the experts come in and tell us how things really should be in terms of building robust legislation. But unfortunately, we're left with a missed opportunity. We will support this, but I just want to reiterate, Mr. Speaker, it is a missed opportunity. Thank you very much.